It's a great pleasure now to bring on board Dr. Fereidun Fesharaki to talk about what his view on the oil market is. Now, Dr. Fesharaki needs no introduction whatsoever. In our several conversations with Dr. Fesharaki on ET Now, he's the one who's predicted many booms and the many bust cycles of crude. I explicitly remember in our last conversation when crude prices were at $120, Dr. Fesharaki was of the view that crude will come down and it will settle anywhere between $80 to about $100. What do we have? Crude is down decisively and it is going to perhaps remain there despite the OPEC cut. Dr. Fesharaki, fantastic to have you back. It's such a pleasure to host you on the show. What do you make of the current demand stroke supply scenario in the oil market? Last time when we interacted with you, you were of the view that oil prices will come down decisively, and guess what? They've come down decisively.
Well, there are two issues with the demand side. One issue is, of course, the China issue. The China's lockdowns, the lack of clarity about what Chinese government is going to do. There are some indications that after the protests in China, that the Chinese government is going to ease the restrictions, and if they ease the restrictions, then the demand will grow faster. But it's not so clear exactly what the Chinese government wants to do. But we do know that as soon as the restrictions in China are lifted, Chinese demand can grow 800,000 to 1 million barrels per day next year. So it is very much, the world oil market is very much dependent on China, and China could make a huge difference in the market. So that's issue number one. Number two issue is there are lots of worries about the global recession. Are we going to have a deep recession? Are we going to have a mild recession or no recession? A deep recession is something like what we had in 2008 and 9, where the demand for oil fell between 2.5 to 3 million barrels per day. And the demand decline can be followed by a drop in the price of oil of $30, $40 a barrel. So very significant if we have that kind of a hit. But if we have a mild recession, the demand can fall a few 100,000 barrels per day, maybe 500,000 barrels per day, and the prices can remain not far off from where they are. OPEC Plus can manage. The policies of OPEC Plus is to manage. They're looking for a flat price between $85 to $100 a barrel. This is the range that OPEC Plus is looking at. There is a floor. If the prices go below $80 a barrel, they will cut production to boost the price. If there is a big recession, OPEC Plus cannot do anything because the demand loss is so great that there is nothing they can do. But if there is a mild recession or no recession, the prices go down because of sentiments, OPEC Plus can manage it. So the supply side can be managed by OPEC Plus. And the policies that Europe and the US have followed in terms of putting the restriction on the price of Russian oil is all nonsensical, and it makes no difference to the market. Russian oil will continue to flow, and the market basically pays no attention to what G7 is doing.
Dr. Fesharaki, it is a widespread belief that the demand for crude and gas normally tends to be higher in the winter month. All early indications are that this time the world is in for a very chilly winter. How come ahead of the winter month, when the demand has just started picking up, oil prices have come down?
But actually, the demand, this has been a very warm winter, unusually warm winter. There is a cold front now for early part of December to end of December, which is expected to go through Europe. But altogether, even if it's a cold front, it still is going to be a warm winter. So in terms of the temperatures, this has been a very, very sort of consumer-friendly winter, that the prices have not been pushed up.
So how should one understand when China will open up? Do you think the demand destruction in the West could make up for the Chinese demand whenever it will open up?
I don't think so. I think that the demand destruction is no longer an important issue. OPEC used to worry a lot that if the price of oil goes up, there will be demand destruction, and demand destruction would mean that the future there would be no big demand growth for oil. OPEC Plus already understands that within a decade, oil demand is not going to grow anymore. So why should I worry about the future demand destruction? What I need to focus on, they think, is to maximize current income. So they want higher prices. They want $85 to $100 a barrel. They prefer 90 plus, but there is a floor. If the prices go below $80, I am positive that they will cut production to boost the price.
The Russian oil, Dr. Fesharaki, is available. India is buying from Russia, and they're buying the Russian oil at a steep discount. What will be the importance of this kind of an arrangement what a country like India has with the Russian oil? What it is doing is that it is ensuring that the oil supply is not impacted.
Well, the oil market is like a big swimming pool. If you take one bucket of water from one part of the pool and throw to another part of the pool, it's still the same swimming pool. So that is really what's happening. Europe used to take Russian oil, and India and China were taking Saudi and Iraqi and Abu Dhabi oil. Now, Europe is taking Saudi oil, Iraqi oil, and Abu Dhabi oil. First time Abu Dhabi oil is flowing into Europe in a big scale. And the Russian oil is coming to India and to China. I think myself that Indian government policy in terms of importing Indian oil from Russia is the right policy. Why should India give up discounted oil price? Because the Europeans and Americans want to put a price cap. And the price cap that they come up is also a very silly price cap. $60 a barrel is not far off from what the Russians are charging anyway. If you want to buy FOB directly from them, it's a $20 discount. If you want to buy it delivered, it's $2 to $5 discount. So it's about $60, $65 anyway. So it makes no impact on the Russian income. It is all to do with the G7, the Europeans and Americans trying to show some muscles to the Russians, but it makes no difference to the market. The market already has ignored the price cap on G7. Nobody pays attention to it. And the oil is flowing, and there is a scenario. That scenario is that if the Russians say, okay, if you want to sell my oil at the price cap, I will not produce. If the Russians cut back production 2 million barrels per day, then the price of oil will go to $100 a barrel or more. So the policy of making the Russians make less money may end up actually making the Russians make more money. So it is one of those bad policies in the West, which rather than they discarding it because it was a bad idea, they insisted that they want to continue it. And then, the emissaries from US and Europe, they come to India and they tell India, don't buy Russian oil. Why not? It only makes sense that India is buying Russian oil, and they should buy more, as much as possible. Russian oil is not ideal for Indian refineries, which prefer heavier Middle Eastern crude. But if the price is right, of course, it can be used, it can be purchased. So this prospects of changing the order of things and expecting that to make a difference in the swimming pool, that is something which is not going to happen. The swimming pool, the same swimming pool. It's just that one bucket has gone from one side to another side, but there's still the same amount of water in the pool.
So, Dr. Fesharaki, let's look at both the scenarios. You are of the view that oil will remain between $80 to about $100. For oil to go below $80, what factors could be at play? And similarly, for oil to go above $100, what needs to change?
Okay. For the prices to go above $100, there must be a supply cut. If the Russians cut supply, the prices will go above $100. And it totally sort of goes against all the spirit and the plan of a price cap. Because the price cap is supposed to keep the prices low, not the prices high. in terms of whether prices go low, that it depends on how deep a recession we're going to have. Number one, and if the Chinese doubles down on the COVID cases and does lockdowns in different places, that can try to go below $80. And if it goes below $80, as I mentioned, the OPEC Plus will cut production and force the prices up. That is, I think, pretty clear cut.
Dr. Fesharaki, in your note and in your recent market outlook, you've also made a case that this is the golden era for refining industry. How do you see gross refining margins moving? There was a time when gross refining margins at the peak of the war were as high as $30 per barrel. Where do you see GRMs in the world settling?
Well, in June of 2022, there was a period of time where the prices were ridiculously high. We should not look at that as a barometer of where things are going. When I talked about the golden age of refining, that's from 2024 to 2030, not just yet. At the moment, the problem for refining is what's happening in China. The Chinese are importing more oil from Russia and exporting refined products to the market. So refined product exports from China have a very direct impact on the refining margins. In 2019, gasoline and diesel exports from Russia were 1 million barrels per day. Until 3 months ago, this number was down by 70%. Now it's creeping back up again. And that makes an impact on the refining margins. We have shut down 4 million barrels per day refining capacity under COVID regulations. And those refineries which have been shut down, they're not coming back. But also in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Oman, and China are adding capacity. But this is the last round of capacity additions. Beyond this, from 2024 onwards, we don't have any evidence that anybody wants to build refineries anywhere in the world. There is the story of the West Coast refinery in India, which is nobody takes that serious, or nobody ever took it serious in the first place. That's not going to happen. So there will be a couple of small additions in India, 160,000 barrels per day refineries, but Indian market will be tight. And if Reliance exports refined products outside of India, the Indian market would have to import a lot of refined products. If Reliance takes all the refined products it's exporting and exporting it or selling it inside of India, then the pressure will not be so much. But Indian market is not going to add new capacity, and the refining margins will be high from 2024 to 2030. After 2030, the demand gradually peaks and the margins will disappear. But there is a golden age of refining to be still in front of us.
What are the chances that the golden age of refinery or refining could be challenged by green hydrogen? The Adanis are expanding, the Reliance group is expanding, and we know that when these two large groups are looking at increasing capacity or looking at capex in the green hydrogen space, that really could be disruptive for a country like India.
Well, the green hydrogen is going to impact replacement of natural gas. It's not going to impact replacement of oil. And a green hydrogen, to make economic sense, is going to take at least until 2030, if not 2040. So yes, I know the Reliance is very keen on this, and Adani is keen on this. But to have an appreciable impact in which the refining margins will be negatively impacted, I doubt it very much.
Do you see the world decisively moving towards clean fuel, whether it's a mandate or whether it's a commitment or whether it is propaganda, but the world will shift gears towards clean fuel, which is a usage of gas and dependence on green hydrogen?
In the 2030s, yes, and actually the most important impact of clean energy is going to be electric vehicles. Of course, in India, electric vehicles will be mostly fed by coal. In China, the same. So electric vehicles in China will end up being more dirty than original internal combustion engine. If you use coal to create electricity, that doesn't work. But it is really still the fuel of the 2030. It's not the fuel of the 2020.
Dr. Fesharaki, are you a big votary of how global policy makers are completely playing back and forth on the entire ESG issue? Before the war, everybody was committed to invest more in non-fossil fuels, alternate sources of energy. But post the war, there seems to be a realization, at least by countries like America, that they have not invested in fossil fuel and they now really need to start their wheel again. Do you think there could be a change of heart purely because of compulsions, especially after the war, and the world wants to be less dependent on Russia?
I think that you're right, but basically energy security is now more important than energy transition. Energy security is then the number one issue. It is interesting that Germany uses more coal than it's ever done in its history for power generation. And so Germany is one of the biggest sort of clean energy advocates, but is a heavy user of coal. Coal prices are historical highs because everybody wants coal. And so we're not talking about oil, we talk about coal, which is much dirtier than oil. So what the Russians have done, they've shown the world that the world still is very, very vulnerable to fossil fuels. And that you better get your act together in fossil fuels first before you think of clean energy. Those who want to leapfrog, I jump over fossil fuels and go to clean energy, are basically proven wrong, and it is a major policy mistake. You get your fossil fuels in order, and then you gradually move. And that means that the movement to clean energy is going to be much, much slower than anybody expected. It is 2050 carbon neutral, most places, almost impossible to reach. 2070, 80 is possible. But the speed, the direction is set already, but the speed is, I think, mistaken by many, many people. And the pace of movement means that you have to make sure that your energy security is at hand before you worry about energy transition.
Dr. Fesharaki, let's talk about the whole gas sector. The prices or the natural gas prices currently are trading way above the average. So while crude prices may not be far above from its 5-year average, natural gas prices are way above their 5-year average. How do you see that impacting, first, Europe, and B, other gas importing nations?
Well, first I have to clarify that you buy gas 3 different ways. You either buy gas at the spot, and all of Europe buys gas at the spot, and that is where the prices are high. Or you buy it on oil index, or you buy it at the Henry Hub US index. If you buy at oil index or Henry Hub index, then you buy on 15, 20-year contracts. If you want to buy a spot, then you don't need any contracts. So many buyers in Asia, especially in India, they thought that I don't have to sign long-term contracts, and I don't like oil indexation. I'll just buy spot. Those people who thought like this have been hurt a great deal. The demand for LNG in Asia this year is down 20 million tons. During COVID, the demand was still positive. But this year, those who depended on the high spot prices, and who are they? They are India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and some other Asian countries. Partially, they bought on the basis of spot price. They have been hurt. However, 80% of Asian LNG imports are based on long-term contracts, and the prices are within $12 to $14 a million BTU for gas. So they've been still quite reasonable if they are oil indexed or if they are US hub indexed. But those who depended on the spot price have been hurt. Now, if you buy from Russia and the Russians have cut back your production to you, despite the high storage volumes in Europe, the spot prices are high. The spot prices of $35 to $40 a million BTU for TTF, which is the spot price in Europe. Unfortunately, the Asian spot price, JKM, is structurally linked to what happens in Europe. So when the European prices go up, Asian prices go up too. And although Asian demand is negative for LNG, the spot price is still going up because of the pressure which is placed from the European price. So it is not correct to think that the gas prices have gone up. Gas prices have gone up for those who depend on the spot price. Those who depended on oil index prices, they have not seen big increases in the price. The price of oil goes up, it goes up, but most of the prices are quite reasonable. So the bottom line of it is that the Europeans make a lot of bad policies, and the bad policy in Europe is translated into Asia. The Europeans, for example, have a carbon tax. We don't have carbon tax in most of Asia. We don't have carbon tax in India. But the Europeans' carbon tax is translated indirectly to the prices that anybody in India wants to buy on the spot. The Europeans are fighting the Russians. India is not fighting the Russians. But the price of gas goes up on the spot basis because of Europe, and that translates to the spot prices in Asia. So the Europeans make policy mistakes, and Asians pay the price.
Right. Dr. Fesharaki, developed countries did use their oil reserve to bring oil prices or crude prices down when they were at its peak. What are the chances that the developed countries may use the current decline in oil prices in order to shore up and rebuild the oil reserves, which in a sense could automatically be a reason why oil prices could move higher?
I think that at the prices of about $86 a barrel today, nobody is going to replenish the volumes. If the prices go below $60, yes. So there is no chance of replenishing what they have used, and they don't have any much extra to do it one more time. Yes, you're right, they did it, and it made an impact on the market. But that impact is all gone now. At the moment, all the power is in the hand of the Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi on the one hand, and Russians on the other hand, about what happens to the supply-demand balance in the market. The Western countries have already fired their guns. They don't have any weapons left.
Final two questions, Dr. Fesharaki. I'll construct two scenarios here, sir. Scenario number one, China opens up and there is a solution to the war between Russia and Ukraine. What happens in scenario number one? And scenario number two, China opens up and there is no resolution to the war. So what happens in scenario one and scenario two?
Well, I can start by the first question. China opening up, as I mentioned, China opens up, the demand can go up 1 million barrels per day immediately next year, and up to 2 million barrels per day by 2024. So it makes a huge impact on the market. But the scenario of there is no end to this war until Mr. Putin resigns. I am absolutely positive that there is no way that US and Europe can come to a resolution as long as Mr. Putin is president of Russia. He may decide to step down and put one of his boys to run the show and he goes in the shadows. That may be possible. But as long as he's there, it is not going to happen. He needs to leave Ukraine, pay for all the damages he's caused, accept to pay reparation for all the people that have been murdered in Ukraine. It's not going to happen as long as he is in power.
Final question, Dr. Fesharaki. Now, Indian economy is growing, the middle class is throbbing, the energy needs are increasing, and India is still not energy sufficient, whether it is gas or oil. What do you think needs to be done in India by the Indian administration to ensure that the future energy needs of India are met?
I think, God has given many gifts to India. big brain power, beautiful technologies, pharmaceutical hub for the world, technical hub for the world. But God has not given resources to India. I'm sorry. It's nothing you can do. The government can run as many NERPs that they want to open the field to other people. God has not given resources to India. That's it. So you have to buy energy and use your other skills to pay for it. And that energy vulnerability continues. And there is nothing that any government can do. The governments can claim I can do this and that. But as long as I remember, Indian governments always have promised the same thing and never succeeded because the resources are not there.
It's a fair point, sir. How can we become energy independent? I think we are a long, long way from there. So, Dr. Fesharaki, really appreciate your time. So glad you could join us. Enjoy your stay in Honolulu, and I certainly look forward to meet you in person soon.